met the guy who would give me my moniker, Famous Ashley Grant. Like, who calls themselves Famous Ashley? Or who calls themselves famous anything, right?
Welcome to the Bloggy Friends Show.
What's up, guys? Famous Ashley Grant here, and it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you finally to the Bloggy Friends Show. I have been talking about starting this show for years now, and though I can't quite say what it is exactly that has prevented me from starting it, a series of events over the past year has led me to realize there's no time quite like the present to just launch already, even if I'm starting awfully and it's awful and it's terrible. I need to just launch. I need to quit being afraid. So if you're listening to this and you're wondering if you should launch, go ahead and do it. You're going to be scared. You're going to be nervous. I know I am, but just do it anyway. Like, you maybe have a really cool idea and you're just as scared as I am, but let's just launch and see what happens. We may hate it, we may love it, but as long as we're trying, isn't that what we're all here to do anyway? So that's why I'm just going to go ahead and get into this right now. I know one thing that has held me back has been the fear of putting myself out there. That's especially true considering the fact that most of the work that I've been doing for the past 6 years doesn't even have my name on it. You see, I've been a ghostwriter since 2014, but long before that is when my writing career actually began. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. In this first episode, what I thought I would do is just share a little bit about who I am, introduce myself, share how I got into blogging, and then explain the origin of my silly moniker that I've been touting since 2009. I'll also share with you what my hope is for this show and what future episodes will look like. So let's dive in. In 2007, my very first written piece was published under my name in my university's newspaper. I was working towards my journalism degree, and getting clips was required for one of my classes. A few short months later, my first paid piece was published in a local Tampa paper called TBT, which stood for Tampa Bay Times. I have to say that from that very first piece in February 2007 in the University of South Florida Oracle newspaper, I was absolutely hooked. For me, there was nothing quite like having your name displayed and a story you had written being visible for all of your peers to see. Then, fast forward, and I got the gig to TBT or to write for TBT, and I was on cloud nine. Like, I was telling everyone, pick up your paper, because I was convinced at this moment that I wanted to be a writer for the rest of my life. Fast forward again to 2009, and at this point, I had several writing gigs under my belt. I was writing stories for various news outlets, both online and in print. And around that time, I was covering a lot of local Tampa events. And at one in particular, I met the guy who would give me my moniker, Famous Ashley Grant. Like, who calls themselves Famous Ashley? Or who calls themselves famous anything, right? Like, I know it sounds silly, but I'll explain why in a minute. His name was Ron McDougall, and at the time, he was known in Tampa as Ron from the Don. He worked for the famous Pink Hotel in St. Petersburg, the Don Cesar, as a concierge. Needless to say, conversations that ensued with Ron were always entertaining. I love chatting with him. He is a great guy. He's just the coolest. So one night when I was covering a story, as I walked into the room, he blurted out, "Oh my God, it's the famous Ashley Grant." I thought it was hilarious and I could not stop laughing. Of course, that night he kept cementing it into my brain by calling me that multiple times. He would introduce me to people and be like, "Have you met the famous Ashley Grant? Do you not know the famous Ashley Grant?" And I can even hear him saying that now. So, Ron, if you're listening, thanks again for the moniker. It still cracks me up and I still use it to this day. When I got home from the night that he called me Famous Ashley, after a little too much white wine, I must confess, I accidentally ordered business cards with the name Famous Ashley Grant instead of Ashley Grant. Now, when they arrived, I bursted out laughing, but then it settled in like, oh my God, what am I going to do? They say famous. But I realized I couldn't exactly return them, and I thought, you know what, why not? I'm just going to hand them out and see what happens. So, incidentally, I started introducing myself as famous Ashley Grant as I was handing out my business card. And it was the first year that I made full time income as a freelance writer. I was so excited. As the momentum picked up during that year, I got excited even more and I bought the domain thefamousashleygrant.com. I decided I was going to keep using it because every time someone met me, they either would laugh at me or they would roll their eyes. But the point is, they would never forget. They would remember who I was. And for me, that became essential to getting more work. Of course, you probably know where some of this is going. Slowly but surely, maintaining the level of work I was getting was becoming a little bit harder. Blame it on the economy, blame it on whatever you want. But as advertisers would pull out, the first people to get cut are always the freelancers. And that's what I've always been, as a freelancer. So come 2013, I was making significantly less income and I began looking for other opportunities. Then in 2014, I'm not kidding when I say ghostwriting literally landed in my lap. I knew how to write. I knew how to take a story and turn it into a really helpful piece of content. But the problem was I couldn't find gigs with newspapers, online publications, etc. So I started writing for businesses who needed content on their websites. Suddenly getting gigs was easy again, as long as my name wasn't on the byline. So I've been doing that while also trying to get more gigs under my own name ever since. Of course, I continue to try to get internet famous enough to make full time income as Ashley. But in the meantime, I'm truly loving how many clients I get to help to get their story out, get their content out for their businesses. So while I'm trying to get internet famous, I'm also trying to help other people get internet famous. All right, so there you have it. That's the backstory of how I got into blogging, how I got my moniker. Now, you might be wondering, why call this the Bloggy Friends Show? And the truth is, the life of a writer can be a really lonely one. I have been writing so much and I write from home most of the time, so I don't really get to see people. But whenever I do, I love calling them my bloggy friends. I started calling the people in my life who were writers and bloggers my bloggy friends, and I liked the idea that anyone who was a friend of mine had a special title. I thought it was cool. Instead of just calling them a friend, I call them a bloggy friend. And I often say, whenever I'm handing someone my business card, let's be friends. In fact, if you've ever met me at a conference or an event, you've probably heard me say that to you as soon as I hand you my business card. I say, let's be friends, because I want to be friends with everybody. So, what will this show be about? Well, I want it to be a show about bloggers, for bloggers, by a blogger. It won't be about how to start a blog, though. In my opinion, there's plenty of posts, podcasts, and vlogging episodes, articles, etc., about how to start a blog. What I'd rather this place be is about the wild world of blogging after you launch, or even after that if you've been around for a while. I want it to be a place to just hang out and learn about bloggers that are actually doing this. I want to share their stories. I want it to be a space to learn about the latest news that could impact your blog, your revenue, or your business. And let's face it, if you're in the blogging world and you're making any kind of money, you can turn this into a business. But most importantly, I want this to be a party to celebrate the coolest people in the blogosphere. I want to celebrate the amazing things everyone's doing online. So the goal of this show is to inspire, educate, and connect. So, what I plan to do is release 10 episodes or so per season as a podcast. And in these first 10 episodes, I will just share all the things I currently know about blogging. I want to talk about ghost blogging, promoting your blog, making money, things like that. Later, I'd love to do a series of interviews with bloggers, vloggers, podcasters, even brands, all with the theme of connection and becoming bloggy friends. So that's what you can expect from me on this show. I do ultimately hope to share episodes and other clips that didn't quite make sense to put a full podcast episode out of on YouTube as well. But without further ado, let's jam on all things blogging. So I'm working on a proper website and social media handles for this show, but for now, you can find me on famousashleygrant.com and as Famous Ashley Grant across social media. So let's be friends. I'd love to connect with you. Until the next episode, may your page views be high and your bounce rate be low. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to y'all later.